Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's build video, I'm putting together a Cadian Lasgun. The Lasgun is one of the most iconic weapons within the Warhammer 40K universe, and if you're putting together my entire Cadian armor set, whether you're going to DragonCon or any other numerous conventions throughout the world, this is an awesome complement to that entire cosplay. With this build, I have two different ways to put it together, so if you're a maker that likes to 3D print, I've got you covered. But if you want to build it the old-fashioned way, I've got that as well. I did 3D model this in Nomad, and I do have links down in the description for that. The STLs for this are absolutely free. For the old-fashioned way, I have PDF files for this available over on my website that you can download and build right along with the video. Now, this weapon is, of course, made all out of my HD foam, some PVC pipes, and some wooden dowels. And because of that, it is extremely lightweight. Now, I am going to finish the 3D model, and that's going to be for display. But I tell you what, I'm going to be trooping with this one. Because when it's all said and done, the entire weapon only weighs 1 pound. Before we get too far into this build, if you are 3D printing it or making it out of foam, be aware of the different sizes that are available. So this is the M36 at full scale. This is 36 inches in length, which would probably look a lot more to scale if I was as tall as a standard guard. I'm not. So I actually shrunk mine down to about 32.5 inches, which fit me a little bit better. So keep that in mind, and if you are putting this out there, the standard template for this is going to be 32.5 inches. So if you want to scale it up, you're going to have to do that. Same thing, I have instructions on the STL file when you go through that link, and it will show you the 32.5 and the 36-inch versions. Now, when it comes to the build on this, I do have the step-by-step on the foam one, but all the painting and weathering can also be utilized for the 3D print. So, I want to show you what it takes to put this weapon together. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start this build by creating the main body of the weapon, which is going to be made up of Part A. This section will be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam. Now, notice that I leave extra material around, and that's because I'm going to cut out both halves at the same time. To create the cutout for the mag release, I'm going to start by using a Forstner bit at the top of the recession. Then I could cut away the excess foam, leaving a perfect channel. To bulk the width of this weapon out, I'm going to be using multiple 2-inch strips of 10mm foam. These will block in the sections as well as help to reinforce the interior. To adhere the foam together, I'm going to be using some weldwood contact cement, which means I'm definitely breaking out my respirator. After the contact cement had been allowed to dry, some 1, 2, 3 blocks help me get perfect right angles. And if you don't have any of these on your workbench, I highly recommend them because I use them all the time. With the main body assembled, I can now start making the pieces that are going to help reinforce the barrel. To create the top barrel, I'm going to be using some 1-inch PVC pipe. And before I think about gluing it into place, I want to make sure to sand the surface to prep it for paint. I'm once again going to be using a Forstner bit to remove the majority of the foam from the interior top circle. Now, this is just a rough cut because I'm going to use my rotary tool to get the correct diameter in the end. To make up the lower section, I'm going to be using a 3/4 inch poplar dowel, and the lower circle is also created using the Forstner bit. I slide the brackets on the back half of the PVC pipe and check for fit, just to make sure that it works before I glue these into place. But after I'm satisfied that everything's going to work, I go ahead and use some Bob Smith superglue to glue these to the interior of the body. The PVC pipe can then be inserted into the foam, but I do leave a little bit of room so that I can add some superglue and pull the pipe back for where I think it needs to be. The front of the lower dowel has a small detail line near the end. I mark this with a pencil and then I can scribe the wood out using a pen file. The dowel, just like the PVC pipe, can then be inserted into the foam and glued into place using some more Bob Smith superglue. Like I had mentioned earlier, I cut multiple strips of 2-inch 10mm foam. These can then be marked, cut, and used to block out the rest of the body. This longer strip is going to be glued to the interior of the body, about 1 inch from the edge. More strips are also marked and cut for the back of the weapon as well. Part C will make up the underside of the body, and this piece is going to be made out of some stacked 10mm and 6mm foam. After the two thicknesses of foam have been glued together using some more contact cement, the foam shape could then be cut out to approximately 2¼ inches wide. I did go ahead and add some more support strips to the underside, and Part C is going to be glued onto these. Part D will make up a small support block between the barrel and the dowel. The handle for this weapon is going to be made up of more stacked foam, the main body of this being part E, which is going to be 2 pieces of 10mm foam glued together. But before I cut these out, I use my template again to create some raised details using some 6mm foam on either side. With all 4 pieces glued together, I can now cut them out at once, and I can refine this shape by sanding the edges using a smooth sanding drum on my Dremel rotary tool. Part G will make up the trigger, and it's just a small piece of 10mm foam. And with the majority of the handle assembled, I can now add the cap. This will entail cutting some 6mm foam to approximately 1 3/4 inch. One thing to note with part I is it's a bridge that goes from the handle to the body, which means that depending on where you place your handle, this piece may need to be adjusted so that it fits properly. I'm adding a bamboo skewer up through the middle of the handle for some additional support. And because I don't want the end of the cut-off skewer visible, I'm cutting a small strip of 2mm foam just to cover this up. Like several of the other pieces, the stock is also going to be made up of stacked foam, this time 2 pieces of 10mm with some 6mm in between. Part K will make up a raised lip on the back of the stock. This is also going to be cut out of some 10mm foam and cut to approximately 1.5 inches wide. Just like the handle, I insert a small piece of bamboo skewer into the stock. This will help reinforce this attachment point once glued to the back of the body. The Aquillas on either side of the body are 3D printed and are the same ones that I'd used on the chest. I did leave the image on the template in case you would like to cut these out of foam as well, but if you do decide to 3D print them, I did leave a link below. But do remember to reduce the overall height because the original file, these are pretty thick. To make the raised section of the barrel, I'm going to be using an additional PVC pipe. This one is 1 1/4 inches. I could then take the extended barrel template and trace that onto the PVC. Now there is a cutout, and the way that I make this is by first drilling at either end. Then I could cut into the PVC and join these 2 holes together. The end can then be sanded at the correct angle, and I use my hobby blade to remove additional flashing. And notice that I marked on the white PVC pipe just how far back this needs to go, because when I'm using super glue here, I'm pretty much get one shot to line it up properly. The blocks at the top of the weapon are going to be made of parts L, M, and N. These are also going to be made using stacked foam. Parts L and N are going to be 10mm, 6mm, and 10mm. Part M is going to be 2 10mm pieces. There is a pipe that runs across the top that connects all these pieces together, which will be made using some 3/4 inch poplar dowel. The dowel is cut and then sanded to the correct angles to match the individual pieces. Now my recommendation would be to start at the back with part L and work your way to the front. That way if you need to do any additional sanding or refining of these pieces, you can. And just to prove that I am human, I messed up on mine just a little bit. Rather than remake it, I'm just cutting a small strip of 2mm foam and gluing that in place. To make the Las pack, part O is going to be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam 2 times. I'm also going to need some strips of 10mm foam cut to 1 1/4 to complete the box. A thing to note with this piece, you could make this pack removable and store things up inside like electronics. But because this is just my troop version, I'm going to be gluing mine into place. To cap the bottom of the box, part P is going to be made out of some 4mm foam, cut to approximately 2.5 inches by 1 3/4 inches. The weapon has some posts on either side of the charge pack, which I'm going to be making using some 1/2 inch dowels. These are cut to approximately 1 inch, and the edges are sanded before being glued and attached to either side of the pack. The weapon also has some raised details at the back, which I'm going to make using part Q and some 2mm foam. The small raised circle in front of this piece is going to be made using a 1/4 inch dowel. The mag release on either side of the weapon is going to be cut out of some 2mm foam utilizing template piece R. Like I'd mentioned in the beginning, I love the fact that there are multiple ways to build a prop like this, but I'm definitely going to be taking the foam version to the con. But with the foam version clocking in at 1 pound, that's awesome for anyone that has to be at a convention or a photo shoot for an extended amount of time. Now before I take it out to paint, I want to make sure to battle damage and weather it just enough to match the armor that I've already made. This starts with an initial pass by adding some nicks and scrapes using a smooth sanding drum on my rotary tool. Then I'll eventually switch over to a stone bit that has more of a dramatic edge. With battle damage in place, I can now heat seal the entire piece and add a little more texture with some tinfoil. To seal this foam and prep it for paint, I'm going to be adding 2 to 3 light coats of Plasti-Dip. Currently it is very hot and humid here in the Midwest, so I have to be careful not to add too much Plasti-Dip at once, because otherwise it won't lay down a smooth finish and it could possibly pool or run. Once I allowed all of that to cure, I could then add the green camo that I used for the armor. First layer of grime is going to be a wash of Liquitex Heavy Body Burnt Sienna and Mars Black. This mixture will be applied to the surface using a bunch of water and a 1-inch mop brush. A damp paper towel is also going to be used to mop up any excessive pigment that's left on the surface. This wash is important because it gets down into all of the nooks and crannies, it helps fill pores, and it preps the surface for additional layers of acrylic paint. So that the weapon matches the armor, I'm now going to add a little bit of the Warhammer Castellan Green. Utilizing a dry mop brush, I'm going to dab this paint onto the surface and then feather it out. I want to specifically leave some of those previous layers so that they show through. I think I had mentioned it in the last painting video, but I bought 2 pots of these and it was enough to do the entire armor plus this weapon. As an edge highlight, I'm going to be mixing together some of the Castellan and some Elysian Green. I watered this mixture down enough so that it could easily go through my airbrush without clumping. I could then lightly spray along the edges of the weapon, giving it a pronounced edge highlight, and I think my PSI for this was around 20 to 25. I also decided to add a few blotches along the body just to break it up a little bit more. Now I'm going to go back with that original green and dab on top of the airbrush. Because that was the original base color, it now looks like paint is being chipped away or it's going back through the different layers of grime. Like the armor that I've already painted, I want the metallic sections on this weapon to stand out. So first layer on the Aquila and detail parts of this weapon are going to be painted using some neutral gray from Liquitex. This will give the parts a great base for the iridescent rich silver to go on top. This gray base will help the flecks and the silver paint be a lot more pronounced in the end. Especially in the last step, when I have everything done, I'm going to go back and add grime to all of it. That'll make sure that the sections that don't have any grime really pop. While I allow the gray to dry, some Mars Black is used to base coat the handle and the stock. Liquitex Heavy Body Iridescent Rich Silver is what I used on the armor and is also what I'm going to be using on this. Its pigment count is significantly higher than the iridescent bright silver, so it has the ability to cover really well. Which also means that if you do happen to get it on your matte green, I would recommend to wipe it away as soon as possible. On the barrel and the pipes, I did take some additional time to brush horizontally. That way it had a little look of being machined from manufacturing. And here's a good example of how much that metallic stands out from the matte green of the body. And I always get the question too about sealing my props. And I will say 99.9% of the time I usually will never add a sealant. I'm buying paints that are a little more expensive and I want those paints to speak for themselves. As soon as you add a matte, gloss, or semi-gloss to it, you kill that sheen. Looking back at my armor, to create those chipping effects, I am going to be once again using a chip brush. These things are great because the bristle quality here is so bad that you get a lot of really cool organic things that happen that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So just like battle damage, I want to go around this weapon and think, where would the heaviest chipping be? Also, another thing I have to take into consideration is that the weapon is probably going to be more banged up than the armor. The way I figure it, soldiers are coming in and parts of the armor are getting destroyed, so they need to be replaced with new ones. But weapons would be much more expensive, so you'd want to gather as many of them from the battlefield as you could. And then they'd be passed down from soldier to soldier to soldier. So in my mind, the wear and tear on these is going to be a lot more. Just like the initial green that I laid down in the beginning, this is a base color for the weathering as well. At this point you want to be adding more, so too much more than not enough. And the reason is, just like that green, we're going to go back on top of this in the end to knock it back. Switching over to the flat side of a filbert brush, it helps me get the paint more on the outside edge of each one of these sections. I also take a little bit of the gray and add it to the stock and handle as well, just to weather them up a little bit. For any of the deep gouges or nicks, I switch over to a smaller detail brush so I can be precise with where that gray paint goes. Like the edge highlight, I'm now going to go back with that original Castilian green and go over some of these chipped areas. And like before, I'm not using any water in this process. I want the bristles on this mop brush to be spread out and flayed. That's what's going to help give that haphazard look to it. As a final highlight on top of parts of that gray, I'm going to go back with that detail brush and add little dots of iridescent rich silver. The gray already looks like chipped paint back down to the metal, but adding the little glints of the iridescent rich silver here and there. While it's not really showing up here in the shop, once I go onto a con floor with huge lights or out in natural light, these little glint areas of silver really pop. And I'm not trying to do this everywhere. I don't want it to look as though the edges are glowing. I just want to pick out some of the deeper cracks and crevices and damage because I picture this being the newest metal that is exposed. So you all can see what it takes to put together the Cadian Lasgun. And again, I have a Facebook group, the Cadian Cosplay Group at DragonCon, and you are all welcome to join. In there, we're just sharing progress photos of how things are going along with our build. And if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKS Props on Twitter and Instagram because I love seeing your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best. HD foam.